be intellectually honest about this and say that basically what we did was to assign, or basically what I did was to assign numeric values as an indicator of positive or negative emotion, if you will, to these various things. And so it might have been my own twisted psyche that set these things up in such a way that all I pick up is the negative. But given that as a potential flaw in the system, I would have to agree with you that there has certainly been a very large increase in that since the brief period of 10 years or so that I've been doing these runs on an active basis. And I know that there is what we call memering or thought virus engineering going on the internet. And I see that same kind of stuff occurring in the language that appears within the media stream as we see through network and cable television. And this memering or thought virus is a very specific form of what is known as neuro-linguistic programming. So there's an active attempt to create fear. And you'll notice it in the language of, the current boob in charge when he comes on out a few weeks back and says, he didn't say like FDR, calm, nothing to fear but fear itself, everybody chill, right? He came on out and started spouting fear and anxiety, got to do this quick or everybody's going to freak out, and all this other stuff, right? So they're promoting the fear. They're attempting to manipulate the emotions in a very negative way.
Indeed they are. As a matter of fact, just last week when he comes out, and as he's speaking, as the words are leaving his lips, the stock market plummets, 300 points or something like that, which just says that, to me anyway, is that even the financial markets, even the global economists know that it's not true. Everything they say is not true, and they react towards it. Emotion, like you said, very interesting. We're at the top of the hour. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to continue with the phone lines open and get some of your emails. Email me, CaptainJack@WPRTradio.com, and Felix will tell you how to call in right now. Stick around. Welcome back, everybody. Paranormal Radio. It's Monday night. My guest tonight is Clif from halfpasthuman.net, and we're talking about bot technology that can pull data from different message boards from all over the world, and what comes out of it is possibly what suggests it's forecasting the future in a sense. It's very, very interesting. And we're going to talk more about that. Cliff, welcome on back to the program, first of all.
Okay, nice crickets, yeah.
I got an email here. It says, this is very fascinating, but could it be that there's so much data being pulled that you can just kind of apply it to certain things? I mean, I'm not a tech...
Sure. That has to be examined as a thing as a component of all forecasting of any kind, prophecy or whatever. You can make your language so vague that it fits anything and everything. And it's just, again, the mental perception of the filters of the people that are observing the apparition. So, yeah, sure, we could certainly do that. It certainly is not our intent, and we try and be intellectually honest as we go along. As you know, having read our reports of trying to peg dates and specific examples to what we're doing. The stuff that we put out on the public forum we kind of see as public announcements, because the more people, for instance, that are aware a large earthquake are coming, then will take, or potentially, will take precautions, lash things down, this sort of a deal. And they'll be, should it happen, they're less agitated, and they can help out people that weren't quite as prepared. And so it kind of dampens down the emotions of the whole thing. But, it certainly must be examined as with anybody, including ourselves. I love a good skeptic, and it's scary sometimes how close we come on the language. We put in what we can in the reports, which get to be very voluminous and tedious to read for people. And even that is only a small fraction of the thousands of words. And so sometimes we may have a description that has 15 or 18 or 20 words that hit the public media one way or another. But behind that, in some reports, there might be hundreds, perhaps even thousands, that are more detail-oriented about it, so we can say with some specificity that we got it a little bit better than was publicly acknowledged. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Let me ask you, you mentioned the earthquakes. I've had Jim Birkeland and Cal Ori on the program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with who they are, but they've been able to, and talking with Jim, as far as his predictions on earthquakes, is it's pretty impressive. Now, we know we had this huge earthquake in China recently, killed hundreds of people, 100,000 people, something like that, and then they just had another one recently. Did the technology pull anything about earthquakes before it happened?
Sure, we get that frequently. The China one, we got a lot of associations with the wedding interrupted and the church that showed up a few weeks later that was all over the internet and the media, where a couple was actually in the act of getting married and the church came down around their ears, but everybody came out. We got that and actually posted warnings for a large earthquake about 36 hours before it occurred. And on Georgia's urban survival site, we put it out there, I think, 29 hours actually before it occurred. We've been talking about it, though, within our reports, maybe a month and a half or 2 months before that, in general sense of an earthquake that was associated with the wedding. And we knew a time because we had a prominent wedding pairing, which was also the Jenna Bush wedding that weekend. And so, because we knew part of our data suggested that some people attending the wedding would have to rush out due to the earthquake, not that they were involved in it, but because it was so large that it would demand their attention. And sure enough, a bunch of the American people related to international relief and stuff that were at the wedding were involved. So we get a bunch of the data around it, and we do have stuff for twin earthquakes coming up in December. That should be fairly large, and the descriptors around them seem to indicate damage, and at least one instance bloody. Now, bear in mind that earthquakes themselves rarely kill people. Usually it's not a mountain sliding down on you or such thing. It's a poorly constructed, poorly engineered structure falling on you. So earthquakes are one of those natural disasters that I've been through a number of very large ones, and they don't scare me. What scares me is bad engineering. So you look around, you observe, what's around you, and you learn that in earthquakes that are sizable, never go under a door frame. It's just not appropriate. Go next to a file cabinet that's absolutely stacked full of paper because a triangular void will be formed on either side of it because it will not compress. Where door frames will crack and they'll compress, or they'll twist. So, there's all these things you can do to protect yourself in those kind of events. And we see that in our data, we have a suggestion that December 10, 11, and 12 is the most likely point of occurrence for a fairly large earthquake, and maybe two of them. And if there's two of them, one of them is going to be in a band of latitude that is 32 degrees to 36 degrees north. Now, this is kind of again, weasel word kind of thing because it covers a huge chunk of the planet. California, Japan, Pakistan, all these seismically active areas. So we have a lot of data associated suggesting that that's going to be one of the locations. The other most probable, that is to say the largest section of data going towards a secondary site for a twin earthquake kind of an occurrence, would be up here in the Pacific Northwest, and actually off sea, and it may cause tsunamis. Probably won't occur. Usually, we've got to be wrong on something somewhere, and so, probably won't happen as we envision it, but we do have indications of an earthquake on or about the window of the 10th, 11th, and 12th. Now, the curious part of that is that hyperdimensionally, and I think you can check this with Mr. Berglund, there's planetary alignments that would tend to support an earthquake on December 12th just because of where they're at.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let me ask you, how often have you been wrong about something like this?
How have we been wrong? Well, at least half the time, in the sense that, there's some stuff that we have not seen appear. Some of the language was inaccurate, or we misinterpreted it. Usually we misinterpret the stuff, even though we get the big emotional event, we're really wide of the mark as to what caused it.
Yes.
So, but on earthquakes, I hate to say it, we're getting a little bit better than we had been in the past.
Yes. So, after an event happens, there's times that you come back and go, okay, well, we called it wrong, as saying it was going to be this. It really turned out to be this because after the event, it kind of a realization, again, the aha moment of, okay, I gotcha.
Correct, and that's part of our feedback loop, is that we have the ability in between each of the runs we're doing to go and digest all the information that came out about the event. So taking the earthquake specifically in China, once the images of the interrupted wedding hit, and we saw the language appearing about it in the chat rooms and on blogs, etc., we were then able to take a lot of that language and go back and correlate it with our predictive language and get a better way to fine-tune that kind of thing in the future.
Yes. Did you ever consider maybe focusing in on one particular thing, like earthquakes, or again, going back to kind of like the financial stock market, or just kind of focusing in on a particular topic, or is it better just to kind of leave it broad until?
Well, yeah, it depends on. We do it both ways. What we call a deterministic mode is when we go out and we focus on a particular word. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, an example of that was we were focusing on terrorism when we caught the power outage in the Northeast, which everybody instantly assumed was part of terrorism. And then we got all this really cool descriptors about actually the place it happened, and allegories and archetypes to actually how it looked and how it all cascaded and so on. But we were wrong on the terrorism part because everybody assumes it was not terrorism. So that's running in deterministic mode. That's a whole lot of work. And it also gets back to the idea that you're throwing out a projection on reality. So I could look, for instance, for terrorism, and I'm certainly going to find it because it's such an active word out there. And then I could look for further words in it, but sooner or later I get to the point where I'm starting to project upon the data, hunting for those words that I think might be associated with it. So I don't really like running it that way.
I see.
I like running it in what we call serendipitous mode, where we give it a few thousand, sometimes tens or 20 or 30,000 keywords that describe elements of context and associations, and we tell it, if you find words that have this kind of an association between each other, then we want to see those. And so we might have an association, taking your instance here with the truck again, we might have instances where we say, let's just start off and say, we're looking for something that involves communications, transportation, and shock. And if you get the relationship between those words and this emotion of balance, and communications has a number 7, and transportation has a number 4, and shock has a number 144, and it forms a mathematical relationship, and if it hunts for words that have a similar relationship and brings them back. And so we get interesting things.
Yes. I got an email here. It says, Captain Jack, you mentioned this at the beginning of the program about Clif with no last name. Now I've been dying to figure out why he hasn't not given the last name. Is he hiding something? Is he wanted? Or is he worried about the CIA coming in and stealing his technology?
Sure, one of the above. Actually, none of the above, really. It's that a couple of issues. My last name's been outed. It's not like it's a big deal or anything.
Yes.
But I don't want to be locally famous. I'm not particularly personality-centered. I don't want to be a celebrity. What I think is really cool is the data and some of the information. I like sharing it.
Sure.
And who I am is actually immaterial. And actually, we get better results the more I remove my ego from the whole process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, what about the CIA aspect of it?
Well, we in a bit of misguided patriotism after 9/11. I offered it to the CIA, and they, through this George Ure went and he filled out this thing called a broad agency announcement, and we sent it in, and a bunch of the agencies looked at it, and CIA got back to us and said, well, kind of cool, but not really what we're interested in, not the kind of thing we do. Because bear in mind, we go the exact opposite. The CIA and all these other people that are intent on watching and controlling everything want to know who's doing what. They want to know who's saying what. It's kind of a 1984 scenario, right? Your television's spying on you. They want to know. Now, never mind the fact that they would have to have as many people. They'd have to split the population in half and have half watching the other in an official capacity in order for that to work, or some fraction thereof. But that's really where they're focused. They're after individuals and so on. And we don't bring back individuals' names. We don't care about who's writing it. What we care about is what's being said and what are the differences between this week's words and last week's. So to a certain extent, it would envision, they'd have to flop their whole universe upside down to grasp it.
Yes.
Or they're already doing it and we're rather crude.
Good point. Very good point. Well, what are some of the hurdles that you're still trying to get over with this? As far as, is there a manpower issue? I mean, if you had more people, maybe working on discerning the information would help in some way, or what are some of the refinements?
We're content to stay where we're at the moment because I think in a few